Hey there, welcome to Car Habit Garage. My name's Eddie Mello, and on today's show, we're going to talk about the E36 LS3 M3 Restomod, and it's the build part one. So today we're going to talk about the parts we had to buy and find, the S52 removal. We're going to show you the test fit, and then all of the engine bay prep. And then I'll give you kind of a little look into what the build part two will be, where we actually showcase all the fabrication and some new problems that we found. So with that, let's get into it. So as you can see from the picture I'm showing right now, the LS3 M3 parts list is actually pretty extensive. So you can see the GM Performance E-Rod LS3 Connect and Cruise Kit. So that's the standard LS3 that was used in the 2010 to 2015 Camaro SS, the 6.2 liter 430 horsepower, 426 pounds of feet of torque. And along with it, you get the T56 Super Magnum transmission, which is the 6 speed. And then it comes with carb legal catalytic converters. Very key, since we know this is going to be a California Restomod, and we'll have to get inspected and get a carb EO sticker from BAR. Other thing we had to put in there is the accessory units, a mid accessory drive from Holley. It's their LS Swap accessory drive system, and it comes with multiple different things. And then a Jammer carb legal cold air intake. Little tidbit, it's the one and only carb legal air intake that we could find for the 2010 to 2015 6.2 liter LS3 engine for that model. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what we actually see here. The Connect and Cruise and obviously the LS3 are really important. That comes all as one system, and along with the clutch assembly and the bell housing. So that's pretty cool. We are not going to necessarily use the electronics. We'll use the wiring harness and everything like that, but we will probably use a different software load. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. So the mid accessory drive is the Holley LS Swap accessory, and it comes with the AC compressor, the alternator, and a power steering pump. And as you can see by the picture, all the associated drives and pulleys that we need in order to make this thing work. It's also the ideal one that works with the packaging of the car as far as fitment and clearance levels. Next, we're going to go to the Jammer Carb Legal Cold Air Intake. So, as I said, this is the only air intake. It's actually quite large. I don't think this picture does it justice, but when I show you the actual picture of it being on the car, it's a very large air cleaner. But well, we measured it out, and there's room to actually make it fit with some moving of some items and some other things. And then the last of the parts list here is the 2010 to 2015 Camaro SS emissions kit. When I say emissions kit, it's not like they actually sell the kit. You would have to put it together. We're actually using a dropout from a 2010 SS Camaro. So we have an exception for the fuel tank to use the 96 M3 gas tank, but we'll need to provide the Camaro fuel pump, the fuel relay, the evap system, the purge valves, everything that probably went inside the GM gas tank will have to be ported over into the BMW gas tank, along with all the evap equipment. That's the most important thing. And then the software as well. So we bought an E-Rod motor because it and the difference between a crate motor, it's the same engine. It just has a different software, and it comes with a couple extra items. But the biggest issue is that when you use an E-Rod motor, it only checks for certain features on the evap and the charcoal canister, which are only legal in California on 95 and older cars. Since I have a 96, I have to make it truly look like it's a dropout from a Chevy Camaro. So we'll use the ECU load from a 2010 Chevy Camaro LS3, and it should allow all the check engine lights and all the different monitors to be seen that CARB wants to see. So let's kind of talk about some of the things we wanted to see before and after. So here's the dyno and the weight of the car. So the dyno, Jake's dyno at Classic Daily was getting a new software upload, so we're not quite sure how accurate these numbers are, but they're probably not too far off. The S52 that was in the car, I believe, had an M50 manifold, intake manifold, and had a Dynon air intake and a Dynon ECU tune on it. So it was probably about as much power as you could get out of it without doing some really unnatural, realistic things. It was basically stock with those additions. And so the dyno readings, as you can see on the picture, were 197 horsepower and 186 pounds of torque. So we're going to kind of just go with those numbers as it is. The weight is true. It's corner weight. So you can see the weight, total weight was 3126 pounds. Now I got to remember, this car was missing a condenser and also an AC compressor and a little bit of the insulation. Not a lot, just some other things. So maybe you knock off another 80 pounds for all that stuff. And the gas tank was almost on empty. So with that, that's the weight. So 3126 pounds. So after we're done, we're going to dyno it and also weigh it to see what the change of adding the LS3 and some of the other suspension enhancements that we've done make the car weigh. So here's some pictures of the S52 removal. It was pretty straightforward. Jake's done a lot of these. It came out and then we looked at the engine bay and tried to look for rust. We'd already identified a couple areas rust. There was one on the shock tower, the passenger side shock tower. It truly was just surface rust after we pulled the motor. No big deal. It could be grinded and then it'll actually be primered and then repainted the engine color when we do engine paint. And with that, I'd actually like to do a little short video introduction, about 45 seconds here, and you get to meet Jake of Classic Daily. And if you're interested to see more of his builds and engine swaps and BMWs and his dyno, it's www.classicdaily.net, and you can see it on the video as we speak right now.
Hey everyone, this is Jake of Classic Daily. Behind me we have a 1996 M3 that we're swapping in an LS3 for a customer in California, which will be CARB legal. So that adds some other complications that we need to keep to make this all work the way it's supposed to be for California. One being we have to use the LS3 Camaro exhaust manifolds. So the engine is sitting in there, it's just laying on the subframe right now, and we're mocking up to find out what we have to change and move to make this work. So the next step would be to cut a couple spots in the frame rail to clear these manifolds. And then we'll make some mounts and go from there. So stay tuned, keep watching, follow us on all the social media aspects, and watch us make this happen.
Go check it out. He's got some fantastic builds. And in fact, one of his Bavarians just sold on Bring a Trailer for a really nice price with an LS1 swap in it. And when Jake does it, it's a complete build. So let's go right in here to the picture of the test for the LS3. You can see it. It's sitting there in the engine bay. It's just sitting on the subframe. And we're actually taking a look at the challenge and adjustments. So let's kind of take a look at what the challenges are. We always knew that we had to put it as far back as we can because we can't change anything on the LS3 motor as it came from a 2010 Chevy Camaro. So that means the exhaust manifolds have to stay. And the biggest issue there is that the steering shaft that comes out needs to somehow get around the driver's side exhaust manifold. So we're going to have to use a custom steering shaft with an extra U-joint in it, and we're going to have to fabricate a bracket to hold and strengthen that steering shaft so it doesn't move or have any play in it. The other thing is the exhaust manifolds on both sides are going to touch the frame rails. So we're going to have to cut out, allow some room for them, and then rebox and reinforce the frame rails. And you'll see some of that. The ABS pump will need to be relocated and just pulled forward. And then we need to figure out how we're going to fit the cold air intake. And when we get into that, you'll start to see that we're probably going to have to move the radiator down to make it work. And so that means, probably fabricating new brackets, both for the ABS, uh, along the way, where the radiator goes, and then even the cold air intake will need some custom brackets as well to mount it, make sure it doesn't move or go anywhere. So in this picture, you can literally see the exhaust manifolds and where the steering shaft comes out, and you could just see how tight it really is in there in the bay of the E36. So we measured it out, we test fit it, we even looked at what brackets needed to be there, and those adjustments will be made. So as you can see, so there was a couple things. So we had to cut out and actually move the steering over half an inch, the steering cable, but you won't be able to notice any of that when it's done, right? We ground down the farthest point of the exhaust manifold just a little bit to add a little more clearance. We had to cut a hole into the frame rail to allow for the exhaust manifold where it connects up to lie there. So that will be boxed in and reinforced. You could see the four pictures and kind of get a good idea of what is going on there with both the steering shaft and assembly and how that has to be moved over, and then with the frame rail on the driver's side. So on the passenger side, it's pretty. You can see that it looks pretty clean there, but the next picture is the hole we had to cut out for the exhaust manifold. Not a big deal. We boxed it back in and we'll reinforce it. It'll all be primered and then painted the same Dakar yellow as the car is now. As I said, the other adjustment we had to make was we actually moved the ABS pump from its original position and we had to move it forward and build new brackets for it. So you could see that challenge as well. And then the cold air intake. So if you look at the pictures right now, you can actually see how large that cold air intake is. Remember, there's only one. Actually, the factory OEM one is so big it would never fit in the E36 without some craziness. So we went with this model right here. It works, it looks. So as you can see, if we take the radiator out and we move it a little bit, we think we can make it work. So with that, I'd like to summarize. As you can see the parts list, we talked about the engine, the connecting crews from GM Performance. We talked about the cold air intake, the jammer air intake, uh, all the different cutting and framing that needs to be done, and box welding and all that. It's going to take place over the next couple of weeks or next week. Hopefully next week I'll be able to give you a kind of a finished look at what it's like. Um, but those challenges are the ones we always knew we were going to encounter: steering, the manifolds, the cold air intake, and then moving and packaging the entire car assembly. And we hope this is kind of a blueprint for other people so they can kind of see what we've done to make it carb legal. And that's the goal of doing these videos with you folks. So with that, I'd like to kind of just take you and give you a brief look into what next week the build part two will look like. And the title of that one's going to be Fabricating Brackets, Reinforcements, and Rust. And you might say, rust? Yes, we found some rust in some very strange places, but I'll go through that next week. But as you can see, that one picture that you're looking at is actually the windshield, where I knew there was some rust because we could see the paint bubbling, but I never knew it was to that level. So I'll show you another area next week. But if you like the video, please press subscribe. The whole goal here is to educate the audience on what it takes to actually build an E36 CARB legal, California legal resto mod. And with that, I look forward to seeing you next week when we'll actually go through all the changes and show you the finished engine bay and final test. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you soon.